Hey, what's up, everybody? On today's episode of Finding Freedom, we're going to be talking to Buck Johnson from CounterFlow, and we're going to be talking about breaking away from mainstream narratives. We're going to be talking about the importance of rediscovering tradition and also exploring the intersection of liberty, culture, and faith. Let's get into the show today.
We are born free, and we will die free. The time in between, though, that's complicated. In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Coming to you live if you are watching live or streaming on YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble on a Friday afternoon here. Beautiful day here in southwestern Pennsylvania. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about some important things happening in the world. Faith, culture, liberty, and we're going to be bringing on, one of my favorite people to talk about all those things, Buck Johnson, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Before I do that, though, I want to remind you guys about my favorite coffee. That is Fox & Sons Coffee. My friend, Stephen Fox, fellow entrepreneur, fellow, like-minded liberty thinker, freedom thinker. Great all-around guy. He's been on the show twice. If you haven't heard his episodes, go back and check them out. But Fox & Sons Coffee is a brand of coffee he started up to teach his son about entrepreneurship. It's fantastic coffee, some of the highest quality. I encourage you to check it out. You can do that by going to Fox & Sons. That's FOXNSONS.com, foxandsons.com. Put promo code John in and get 15% off an order of $40 or more. All right, with that, let's get into today's show. I'll bring Buck in here. And for those of you who don't know Buck Johnson, he's the host of the CounterFlow Podcast. And like I said, we're going to be talking about culture, faith, liberty, and really the importance of pushing back on this mainstream narrative and how that ties in to living a life of freedom. So, Buck, great to have you here on Finding Freedom. Looks like you're muted there.
How about that?
There we go. Now we're rolling.
One of these days, I'll be a professional podcaster.
Yeah. Thanks, say,
John.
Great to have you. They say what, 1,000? Is it 10,000 hours? 1,000 hours to become an expert? Is that?
Yeah,
is that
something like that. I don't guess I'm there yet. We're at 3. I don't even know how many episodes I have. Someone recently said it to me, and I thought, I don't know the answer to that, but it was over 300. So that's not enough hours yet.
I was trying to remember before the show the name of the podcast you had before CounterFlow.
Oh, yeah. I have it tattooed right here, but I don't know if you guys can see that. Death to Tyrants.
Okay, that's right.
That's when I was an atheist and cap back in those days.
Yeah. So when you started CounterFlow, had you become a Christian at that point?
No, not yet.
Okay.
That was very shortly before.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember when you made the switch, it was when you went over to Thaddeus's network, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not a part of that. That sort of fell apart. But
Okay.
That was the reason for the branding change initially.
Yeah. Well, it's funny with, podcasting networks and these types of things. Yeah, but with Lions of Liberty, we've had a couple different iterations and things change fluently over time. So I know how that goes. But the important thing is, you're doing awesome with your podcast. Fantastic guests. So nice. I'm a fan. But
thank you. Right back at you, by the way.
Thank you. And I wanted to bring you on because I've heard you talk about becoming a Christian on other podcasts, but maybe some of my audience isn't familiar with you, and I think your story is pretty powerful, especially in this day and age where maybe there's probably somebody listening out there who maybe previously, maybe even 2 weeks ago, was an atheist, before really this huge massive story happened with Charlie Kirk being shot, and so many of us seeing it all over our feed in sort of like a massive trauma event. I think it's really shaken a lot of people. And talking to my friends and other people I know, either in person or on social media, saying that they're seeing more people turning out for church services, more people asking questions and things of that nature. So I think this is kind of a really good time to have you on to kind of talk about that story. So that's where I want to start. If you wouldn't mind, I'll just pass the mic to you, and if you just want to kind of take it from here and just share your story, your journey to Christ.
Yeah. So I guess the Charlie Kirk thing, you could say, was a historical, a history-changing shift. I think that's yet to be seen, but it feels like that way in the moment. COVID was the same way, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us came to the church, the Orthodox Church, at least. One of the reasons this happened during COVID is because a lot of churches weren't open, and not even all Orthodox churches were open, but many of them were. And the one in my small little hometown, or the town I live in now, was. And so that was beneficial. I will say, as to how it started, so the branding switch to CounterFlow started in 2020, January, I believe, like the first, second, or third was my first episode of CounterFlow. Mm-hmm. I believe it was with Tho Bishop and Thaddeus Russell, but I cannot specifically remember. And, it's like the start of 2020, here we go. What is this going to get us into? And I was trying to broaden my scope of discussion, because I didn't want to strictly be libertarian and only focus on that sort of thing. So I was like, let's
death to tyrants kind of narrows your focus.
It did, yes. And to Thaddeus's credit, he's the one that told me that. He said it sounds so strident. And as he told me that, I started thinking, you know what? There have been guests that I know for a fact, or potential guests, that turned me down because of that name. So I was all down to change it. The CounterFlow thing happened. My buddy Bobby, who's my video producer, I think, came up with it on his list. We had a list of names, and it was like, well, I'm into music that's counter to the flow of the mainstream. My politics certainly are. I didn't know that my religion soon would be. And even my job as a firefighter, he was like, well, you go in and everyone's running out. So even that, and I was like, that works. That works.
That's pretty cool.
So we did the rebrand, and then COVID stuff happened. March 17th of 2020 was the lockdowns. And I had been talking already to Vin Armani, who now goes by Cyprian, and my friend Matt Erickson, who runs the King Pilled show. I was friends with both of those guys, and I had both of them on in and around that time. Well, Matt was inquiring into Orthodoxy, and he looked at things in sort of a deeper way than I thought a lot of people were regarding what was going down. And so he dropped that seed here and there, Orthodoxy. And then Vin was on, and afterwards I said, your instincts of all of this COVID stuff. So this was already, well into the COVID year. Mm-hmm. And he had moved to Saipan. He knew immediately, just before even lockdowns, he's like, we got to get out of California. And I said, you have an interesting way of seeing things and sort of analyzing it that a lot of other people don't have. And this is offline now. And he says, if you look at what's going on through a materialist lens, you've lost the entire plot. This is all spiritual. And I had already started softening. I didn't consider myself an atheist. I, at that point, was like, okay, I'm agnostic. Because if you're saying those people that believe in God are stupid, it's like, well, then you're stupid for saying you know for a fact there's not one because you don't know that. And so I was like, well, I don't want to be in that camp. So I was agnostic, started talking to Vin offline. He says, this is all spiritual. And that sort of clicked to me because you start to see what was happening with the lockdowns. And this was pre-jab stuff. And I was already like, something's wrong with people. This isn't just like, oh, this governor was a goofball or this, but it's like worldwide. They're not all just making a mistake, like the John Stossel view of libertarianism. Like, these guys, what are they thinking? So I started to think like some of this is real evil. And then it got worse, of course. And so offline again, I told Vin, well, I asked him, what is you keep saying orthodoxy? And my friend Matt Erickson talks about that. What is that? He gave me a brief summary of it. And he said, order this book by this fella named Father Seraphim Rose. And it's called God's Revelation to the Human Heart. It's a pamphlet. And he knew I was sort of a libertarian. He goes, it's like, goodness, now that Rothbard pamphlet book, now it's escaping my mind.
What's the government done to our money?
Is not that? That's the one I was initially thinking, but it's not. Anatomy of the State.
Okay.
And he compared, it's like it's an easy read. It's basically a narration of a speech he gave on a college campus. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Amazon ordered. Get it. See it. The cover looked kind of weird to me. Waited a week or two, set it aside, kept doing the show. And then I decided to read it. And my chest was like expanding and warm and my mind was being blown. And I had an angst, I suppose, against sort of the megachurch Christianity that I knew as a teenager. So I always had a distaste for that sort of thing. There's a funny TV show, where they're sort of mocking the megachurch thing. I can't remember. If anyone's listening live, help me out. But people are always said, you would like that show because it's mocking these things you don't like. But I'm reading this Seraphim Rose book, and I was like, this is not that. So what is this Christianity? Like of the heart, not of the mind? All of these things, it just felt amazing. So I was like, well, I'm blown away. Let me look. And my buddy Bobby, aforementioned, says, there's an Orthodox church in Lockhart, and it's open. And by that time, Texas, to our credit, the lockdown was largely over. We only had 6 weeks, I think. And he said, apparently they never closed even during lockdown. I was immediately like, oh,
wow.
Well, okay, that's I can ride with that. So I went and saw the church, but I didn't go in. I was scared because I looked different. I'm covered with ink, and I didn't know anything about this outside of the little book that I read. So I'm like, their tradition's super old. What are they dressed like? Are they going to think I'm crazy? I'm on this fringe political, map. And so I just kept driving by, and I didn't go in, like almost every day.
So at that time, did you even know of anybody who went to the church?
Well, I'm about to tell you that. That's perfect timing. Good segue, John. This guy DMs me on Twitter that followed me. And he was like a right wing. It had like an avatar that wasn't him, that sort of thing. His name wasn't really him. And he says, hey, I heard you on the Pete Quinones show say that you live in Lockhart. I would like to invite you to my church there. It's Orthodox. It's an Orthodox church. Wow. And I think you'd be interested. And I was like, who is this? I was like, do you live in Lockhart? And he goes, no, I'm an hour away. And I was like, how strange is this? And he goes, I said, did you know that I'm looking into it? He goes, no, but I just felt this urge to invite you. And I said, well, I just read this book by Father Seraphim Rose, and I've been looking at that church. And he goes, well, Father Seraphim Rose is my family's patron saint, and he's hanging on an icon. He's on an icon hanging in this parish. And he was like, the fact that I just got this urge to DM you and didn't know any of this, and you've read Father Seraphim's book, and you've been looking at that church, you understand these aren't coincidences. And I still had this materialist mindset, like, well, I mean, could be coincidence. Don't you know? And so I was like, okay, what do I dress? Do they care what I dress like? I have tattoos on both arms. And he's like, dude, no, don't, don't worry about that. And so I went to my first liturgy, which was really different because I was used to a pastor named John Hagee in a mega church in San Antonio who yelled. And as a teenager, I kind of thought that was like cool. He was literally a Bible thumper, hitting it, yelling and passionate. Very pro. He had Israeli flags on each side of the stage. Crazy now looking back. But
Mm-hmm.
so I go to this liturgy, at which, the liturgy that we use there was started around 400 AD. And so this sounded beautiful, different, old, and just, I was like, what in the world? And there's incense. He's, the priest is sensing people, and it's, jangling back and forth, and everyone's singing the prayers. And I was like, okay, interesting. I want to do this again. I'm not sure what's going on here. And afterwards, talked to the priest. I was a little nervous because he'd go, here you have a podcast. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to talk about that. He sort of made a joke to me. Well, I'm somewhere to the right of Attila the Hun. So, and he goes, no one hates communism more than the Orthodox Christians. The communists destroyed millions of us in Russia, and it really created a lot of saints. And I was like, oh, well, then we're probably good here. And so it sort of went from there. I'll quit rambling and let you jump off that.
I mean, well, I just want to reinforce again. So talking about how, you have this curiosity, coming from you. I mean, really, that's not coming from you. That's coming from the Holy Spirit, right? And at the same time, totally unrelated, some guy who doesn't even know you reaches out to you to invite you to a church that you've been driving by.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind blowing. That's only God right there. So that's awesome to hear. So, like, you have your first experience in the Orthodox Church. Did you start, going every week? Was it something where, did you get more comfortable quickly? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I decided, these probably were not coincidences. So if there is a God, he's opening up doors here. So at least take this lead and follow. So I started going every week and started, then you start to know I know where we're at in the liturgy. I'll remember this part. I know what happens next. Now they do communion. I can't do communion. I'm not baptized. So I started learning the process and the patterns, and just kept going until, and then I'm getting books, because a lot of us, like you understand and your audience knows, coming from the libertarian world, we just want to devour, like, well, I want to read a book about it. And now I got to know when this started. And I started like tracing the history of the church and all of these things. And my mind is being blown constantly, a little bit disappointed in myself. Like, why did this escape me for so long? And then I came to what I think is the correct realization, that I wasn't ready for it. This could have been presented to me 6 years prior, and I might have laughed it off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the timing has to be correct, and you can't push people into things like this. I've learned that you can't argue anyone into heaven, but you can certainly argue them out. And so, yeah, I just kept going. I started reading and devouring books. And so the guy that DM'd me became what we call a sponsor or a godparent, meaning once I decided, yes, I want to do this, you get to be made a catechumen. And that's a year or two process before you get baptized. We can liken it to you're engaged now. And so once you're engaged, you're a catechumen, he's my helper, if you will. He's my godfather. And so, it's just funny how all of this worked. And he's been an Orthodox for 30 years. So he would say, I want you to read this, and then contrast it with this other thing. He kept emphasizing, this is not a religion of how much you know in your brain. This is of the heart and the soul. And so while it's good to learn things, and I know you've got that curiosity about the historical moments within the history of the church, don't let that be all that it means to you. This is not so you can win an argument on church history with someone. This is about your heart, and it's a Christianity found inside you. It deals with you fixing yourself and quit worrying about fixing other people. That's not up to you. And so these sort of lessons were happening throughout.
So how did since you've become a Christian, since you've I guess what's the proper way to say it in Orthodoxy, since you've converted, or
since you were baptized,
since you were baptized, how has this changed? I guess just to take it, sort of one segment at a time, rather than saying, how's it changed everything? I mean, how's it changed how you look at, political things, how you look at how to navigate this world? I think you were already kind of looking at libertarianism and understanding that it probably wasn't the answer, but how has your newfound faith influenced your politics?
I would say I'm less focused on politics. We also have in Orthodoxy someone called a spiritual father. Typically, it's your priest. I'm lucky enough, almost. It's like when you have a stepdad and a real dad, and then you get extra gifts or whatever. I have my priest is not technically my spiritual father, although he's there for that anytime I need him. And then I have a man named Father Turbo Qualls, who's been on my show and several shows, who is my actual spiritual father. And Father Turbo told me once, prior to getting baptized, he flew down here to baptize me. So we got to spend a lot of time together. And he was like, I got to tell you one thing in regards to your podcast and where you've been and how you're so into politics. I get it. And he was a former libertarian. He's like, I've been in all these things. And he said, once you're an Orthodox Christian, quit worrying about saving the United States of America. That's not an issue. He was like, empires come and go. This one's going to go just like all the other ones do. You can't stop that. And the church has never, ever faltered. The church lived through every empire, and it always will. He goes, so I'd rather you shift your focus to that and quit worrying about which politics affect people in the moment. He goes, I still get your appreciation for it. It's fine. But there's a line we say in the Beatitudes, don't put your trust in princes and sons of men. Literally say that every Sunday. And so you start to understand that. It's like, would I rather Trump win than Kamala? Obviously. And I did some episodes still around that because I'm fascinated with that sort of thing. But in other words, I'm not going all in on Donald Trump. He's going to save America and he's got my full support because XYZ. It's like, understand there's micro moments of importance and then macro moments of importance. Don't get focused on the micro. Enjoy politics for what it is. A lot of it we can't affect. And so don't put all your faith in trying to do just that.
Right. And it shouldn't, get to the point where a political loss or a political event, affects our heart in a way that it affects our relationship with God. Right.
Right.
I mean, if it's diverting us down to a different path away from God, obviously that's not a good thing. But I mean, I think that's a problem I see really with a lot of this America First movement. That it's more tied up. Sure, there's or like I guess Christian nationalism would be a better term for it. There are people who they probably are Christians, most of them at least. I mean, who knows what their heart says, but a lot of them are putting the United States, just like you were talking about, we can't get caught up in this idea of the United States. The United States, I mean, it's not going to be here forever. That's a fact. I mean, like you said, empires come and go. We're still a pretty young country as it is, but nothing lasts forever. I mean, well, there's one thing that lasts
Yeah,
forever.
yeah, there
But
is a thing that does. So that focus on that.
yeah,
And
but
to your point, also, we should be able to see this easier. And I say we, those of us who are right of center politically, look at what the left did when Trump won the first time. It like shattered their existence. The people crying and screaming and all, they're all memes now because they don't have God for the most part. I'm not, this is broad sweeping generalization, but a lot of lefties are atheists or spiritual. But their whole faith is in that system. And at that moment, Hillary Clinton. And it's just like their world was shattered. Like that's crazy to me. If Trump, who I voted for, would have lost, I mean, I'd be bummed internally that I'd have to hear Kamala Harris's cackle for 4 years, but it's not like my insides would just be broken apart or my worldview shattered because I don't have all my faith in this system.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of the problem. Like when it comes to when we look at libertarians, and I look at myself only about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, not that long, where we had this idea, at least I did, and I know a lot of people had the same idea, that we thought there was a way that through politics we could come to power as libertarians and then just set everyone free. They say at libertarian conventions, we want to achieve liberty in our lifetime. Like, what does that even mean? Like, it's kind of a ridiculous thing to say. And I know I've heard, I think it's Cyprian that I've heard talk about this before, where libertarianism really, in a way, is just Christianity without
God,
without Christ, without God. Just
yes.
Is that taken away? So a lot of people who are libertarians, and I mean, this goes for Republicans and Democrats too. I don't want to. I guess I shouldn't be picking on libertarians, but it's kind of what I do, because a lot of people who are libertarians listen to this show, and I just think people need to think about things differently. But human beings are made to worship, right?
Correct.
And they get stuck in this view, this materialistic view, that it's a worship of the free market. It's a worship of Austrian economics. If we could just implement this system, then we could save everyone.
Yeah. Did I still have you there, John? Making sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thought the same thing, honestly. I was huge with the Ron Paul 08 and 12, like working boots on the ground sort of thing. And I remember seeing the first round of Republican debates in 08, or I suppose it was 07, maybe, given the year. And I was legitimately shocked that Fox News kept ignoring him or insulting him or trying to make him look like a clown. I was shocked. That's how naive I was. And I thought, what are they doing? I thought, like, Fox is like the conservative network. Why would you not like Ron Paul? And so fast forward all these years, I had been voting libertarian, sort of, if we could, I literally started Death to Tyrants thinking, if I could, one aspect was if I could meet some of these heroes like Tom Woods and Lou Rockwell and Jeff Dice, that's neat and a neat experience. But if I could get their voices out there to, like, all these musicians I know that are left wing and all of this stuff, then they'll change their mind. Because deep down, we all want freedom, don't we? And then 2020 hits, and it was another earth-shattering, a worldview-shattering moment for me, because I was like, oh no, okay, a lot of people don't want that. That's interesting. I saw friends, I had lost friends because they knew I went out to gatherings or that I wasn't going to wear a mask. And the people were, like, really upset. I knew a guy that I was close to for 15 years say, who also is anti-police, by the way, say that Austin Police Department, Austin Police Department should fly a drone over neighborhoods, and anyone who's walking and hanging out outside should shoot them.
What?
And it's like, wow, okay.
That's
I've been thinking that if people like this could hear the liberty message for all these years, they want liberty deep down inside. Nope, never mind. No, they do not. People will be dictators at the slightest taste of any sort of little power. Not everyone, right? But a lot would. The message boards on neighborhood groups and next door apps and social media. Ooh, these people were gathering, and it was just like I had to reassess because I was wrong. People don't want liberty en masse, and we just witnessed that. Because if majority of the population did, that would have been impossible to work with what they were doing there, because it took a lot of people to go, oh yeah, not only will I go along with this, I'll be an arm of the state for free and just report to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, using good old Tim Walls's tip line up there in Minnesota.
Yes. Yeah. He was talking. Tim Walz and Governor Gavin Newsom were just talking. I saw clips from him on how Trump is tyrannical and fascist because he's enforcing illegal immigration through ICE. And it's like, Gavin Newsom, you get to say who's tyrannical. You ruined what many consider the most beautiful state in the entire union. And he ruined it. He didn't have to get locked down, as we remember. He was having wine parties in Napa, but it's like, it's useless to point out hypocrisy, but it's still wild when you see it so blatantly.
Yeah. And talking about the historical moments. So what you just talked about there with COVID, and what you just talked about there with the masks, and your friend who said, we should execute these people who are not complying.
Yes.
I remember Bill Burr, a comedian who I used to find hilarious. And this was a joke, so you can take it as a joke, but I didn't think it was very funny, because I think, with the jokes, there's a little bit of, you get the comedian's worldview in it too, of course.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, I think it was a Green Bay Packers football game or something. And he's like, look at all these people who aren't wearing masks. We should just, send some drones over the stadium and bomb it, wipe out all the people who aren't wearing masks. It's like, why? Why? Sure, you're telling a joke, but
there's somewhere where he thinks that.
Yeah, there's some truth in there, and we've seen that more and more of that come out over the years with Bill Burr. So something's happening with him, spiritually, probably. As we as we've learned here, yes. But just kind of continuing on with historical events and seeing these shifts. You think of COVID, and now with Charlie Kirk, and we could talk about what actually happened. Do we believe the story from the FBI? Yes or no? I talked about that on my last show, and we don't need to get into that. We can if you want to. That aside, though, just looking at the reaction that we saw from people on social media, people cheering the murder of someone who's just out there speaking. Literally their entire thing for their nonprofit organization was, I want to talk to people. And, shame on me, because I didn't understand really what Charlie Kirk's main mission was, and that was spreading the gospel. I think I still had kind of a little bit of a segment of a libertarian blinders on, where, I was told, oh, he's just a Mitt Romney Republican, blah, blah, blah. And that was just one little area that I hadn't been able to shake that off, just to see that, because immediately after he was murdered and I started having all these Charlie Kirk videos pop up in my feed, I'm like, man. And of course, the more you watch, so I was watching more and more of the ones where he was talking about faith. So I saw more and more of the ones where he was talking about faith. And I'm like, this is incredible. This guy's was going on to college campuses preaching the gospel. But seeing the world saw him get gunned down, and people that you grow up with, people that you maybe used to hang out with, or um,
Yeah.
have just friendly conversations with, just saying horrible things, saying that I'm glad he's gone, or I'm not going to shed a tear for him. It's like, whoa, like it shook me, and I think it shook a lot of people seeing that kind of behavior. And it's just to go back to what you said before. A lot of these people, it's spiritual. It's
Yes.
spiritual warfare, right? I mean, there are demons at play here.
Yeah, big time. And they've infested a lot of people that we know. I don't think it's a far cry to understand that someone who would say, well, if you leave your house at the very little, you should be thrown in jail, or as the guy I knew, you should be shot down. That's not does that now make sense? It's like, yeah, well, sure, those people are going to cheer on Charlie Kirk's public execution because they think if you publicly do something that spiritually or politically offends them deeply, then you should be eliminated. And you could see within the post, I saw several, there's a very dark nihilism within these people. And I lean towards thinking this is non-falsifiable, but if Charlie Kirk was strictly political and never mentioned Christ, I don't think they would have gunned him down. That's my instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's plenty of right-wing pundits out there that speak to young people, and they're not targets like that. So I lean towards thinking that's a major part of the threat because, well, I mean, the demons and the evil one and the threat to them is not through politics. It's through Christ. And so fortunately, Charlie was talking about that stuff. And I think, God uses good, bad for good all of the time. Like you said, and the same with me. I was familiar with him prior, and I sort of wrote him off, and I publicly would apologize for that as one who, it's ironic, I wrote him off as one who sounded a little bit like a boomer. The irony is his massive audience is college students, which is a great thing. And that was a mistake on my part. But more people know what he was discussing now by far than they did prior to that day.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about a goal of having, I think, 10,000 chapters of Turning Point on college and high school campuses. And since his passing, there's been requests for like 50,000 across the country. So, like these things, you were talking earlier about the rise and fall of empires, and things are going to come and go in this world. And when you look back to the Bible, when you look back to the book of Acts, there was a pattern to the early church. There would be a revival, and then there would be suppression of it, and then riots, and there'd be a revival, riot, and that's what we're going through right now. I mean, this is the pushback against it, against Christ, and I think a revival is coming. But that's just I mean, if you look back through the world, it's a pattern. So we can definitely take heart in that.
Yeah, the revival, it's a good time for it, the way things have been going. So I think that's a good thing. There was, sometimes things manifest obviously through politics. There seemed to be a swing towards the right already because your average person that wants to grill and enjoy his family and whatnot was sick. Like the left infiltrates every aspect of everything. So I think a lot of normal people were sick of hearing about just stuff like male athletes being women and all of these things. And the nonstop demonizing of the average American or
It's crazy that's what finally pushed people over the edge. Like, oh,
yeah.
we're letting men play women's sports. Like,
It got that absurd. I think the COVID stuff started to look absurd to your average person, and then the push for the jabs. And I met so many people that I didn't know previously that were like, yeah, I didn't take that. And it's like, oh, okay. So I felt like, well, I'm not the fringe anymore. And I've just come across that a lot. Even in the dating world, I had noticed women. Now, maybe it's because of the kind that we would gravitate towards one another, but women were like, I'm so sick of the roles of being reversed and men not wanting to do anything, and the women's supposed to be in charge. And I heard it so often, and just single female personal friends saying, I'm sick of being in my masculine energy. I want to be a female. So all of these things, those are all spiritual, but they're manifesting themselves in various ways. So it's sort of ripe for this kind of revival feeling. It sucks that part of what's kicking this off is the public execution of a young, successful, seemingly good man. But that's how these things work sometimes.
yeah. And I don't know if you watched Erica Kirk, what she said at the memorial. I thought that was one of the most powerful talks I've ever seen. I mean, to go on, even to be able to have the composure to go on stage and speak at all after your husband being gunned down is just amazing to me. And then for her to forgive the shooter, like, it's just incredible. I saw a tweet from Tim Allen, the comedian, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, saying that, seeing that and seeing Erica Kirk have the boldness to go out there and forgive the kid who murdered her husband. Tim Allen, I didn't know this. I guess his father was murdered, and he's carried that. He's carried that with him all his life, not forgiving that man. And he said that this has encouraged him to forgive the man who murdered his father. So I'm like getting goosebumps talking about this, but spiritually, like big things are happening right now.
Yeah, that was an important moment. It opened up, I noticed, some conversation online, a lot of confusion. And I respect Stefan Molyneux a lot. I would love to have him back on my show. I like the way he speaks, and he's a very deep thinker, but he's definitely wrong. I notice he's been pushing back like, well, the killer didn't repent. You don't forgive those who don't repent. And he's just wrong on that, and that's fine. He's not wrong on many things, so it's okay that he doesn't grasp that. I've tried to like subtweet or tweet under him like, hey, I specifically asked an Orthodox priest this exact question because you brought it up. Here's the answer.
So what is, if you can share, like, what is your answer or the priest's answer on that?
We don't wait for somebody to repent to forgive them. I think a big misunderstanding, it could be the vernacular to some of this. It's like, so if someone murders my mom, I can forgive them. It doesn't mean I think, okay, I forgive you and just come live with me and be my friend, right? It means he could still get the death penalty, but I have forgiven him, because the reason is, if you hate sin, you have to love the sinner. Sin is a sickness. This kid, let's pretend the official narrative's correct. Okay. For sake of this discussion, this kid had something extremely dark spiritually going on in him. To an extent, that's his fault. You can go to Christ and go to church and push back and get an exorcism if that's what you need and figure these things out. But people were in an age of nihilism, where you have been in a post-Christian age for a large amount of time. This kid's been eaten up with demonic stuff. And so we hate that part of it. You don't hate the kid. He was a vessel. He has the image. We all have the image of Christ. And so you have to forgive them. There's a selfish motive in a way that also works, like maybe Tim Allen's point. You're carrying this darkness inside you. Why don't you want to let's let that go? Forgive the person. It doesn't mean he should go be free and, be free to do that again to someone. But it
Right.
means
It's not saying there shouldn't be justice.
correct.
Right.
But you forgive them. It's that you've lifted that off of your shoulders, out of your heart, the hate, let it go.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for us to deal with anyway. This man will face that issue down the road with a higher power. And it's not we all sinned. I don't want someone to hate me because I sinned, but not forgive me because I sinned. We're not perfect. So that happens. And I think there's just this narrative out there that that's weak or something like that. And it's like, no, I mean, I'm fine if the kid maybe gets the death penalty, but I loved that Erica forgave him.
Yeah.
And just another point,
yeah.
in the prayer given to, I think it was in Matthew, from Christ, the Lord's Prayer says in it, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Meaning, Lord, forgive me as I'm forgiving these people. If you're going to hold this hatred and not forgive people, but yet go, well, yeah, but please forgive me for stuff. Do you think you deserve that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I wonder, when we look at this kid, and you said before, assume this kid did it, and I don't know if he did or didn't, but just to kind of talk about this idea for a minute, I think that the current society, the current world we live in, and I talked about this a little bit on last week's show, but we've lost, all trust in institutions, especially young people. They've lived through COVID. Yeah. They had their high school graduation canceled and all these different things, and didn't get to, have, some of the biggest events in their young life were wiped out by these institutions that told them, you have to do this, otherwise you're going to kill your grandmother. And it was all crap. None of it was real. So that you have a lot of people searching for truth. And a concern that I have is there's people who also maybe are not good people, who are, and you have to tread lightly kind of explaining this, because people will kind of jump on me, but there's definitely people out there who are on the side of the conspiracy, and they monetize conspiracy theories, and it's how they make their living. And anything that happens, they're going to search for, whatever details, evidence, whatever's out there in order to affirm the bias that they already have for whatever conspiracy they think it is. So, like, I struggle with this, because I do, like, when I talk about this, I think we should question what happened. I think a lot of people, maybe they can't even wrap their head around how a young kid who's 22 years old could get to the position where he would climb up on a roof and murder someone else. And I think we need to understand that is possible. Yes. I mean, that evil is absolutely able to overcome a human being, for sure.
Yes.
So I think that's a part of it. Why we just want to jump, like there's a massive jump of people saying this, it couldn't have been him. It has to be another story to it, which maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But what are your thoughts on that dynamic?
Or maybe it's both. Maybe it was him, and there's also maybe more parts and moving pieces to this. That's probably where I would fall in this discussion at this point in the timeline. But it reminds me of, I got into Ron Paul and Alex Jones like in the late 90s, because Alex had a public access TV show. Then in Austin, it's hard to believe now, but there was an FM radio station. Keep in mind, this is 2000, 2001, 2, 3, before smartphones, before podcasts. There was an FM radio station that was only talk, and it was all conspiracy. And Alex was the main draw because he's from Austin. So we all knew him. And again, so that to say, I have been in and around the conspiracy world for 27 years, probably. Part of the problem when you get ate up with the conspiracy is, this is again, like where the term worship means, like where you give your attention, attend to. There's a tendency in some of us to worship the conspiracy and always be just swimming in that, and you get lost in the deep end. And again, it's this inductive reasoning, like where I start with a conspiracy, and then I work my way back and go, that proves me right. That doesn't seem like it proves, well, that's probably bullshit. This proves me right. And then you're like, you've got this picture you painted because you started at the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And so your stuff about saying it negates the fact that, like, no, this kid could be that evil. So like something dark has entered him. Of course, that's exactly right. And you're dismissing that if out of hand, if you immediately search for something else, much like I don't want to get, I don't know, well, YouTube seems more free lately, but with the September 11 stuff in 2001, I think you're dismissing the danger of American foreign policy to just go, no way, dude, these was remote control airplanes, and that's a missile that hit over here, and then nothing really hit over here. It's like, no, you can have both. And our foreign policy clearly has blowback. It pisses people off. That could exactly be what that was on September 11. And people within certain groups or in and around the government might have known about it and might have allowed it to happen. That's seems to be the case, especially
probably the most likely thing would happen.
If you watch the Tucker Carlson 5-part series on this, where he dives in and talks to FBI people. But to just think, no, it was people using remote control. These are it's like, okay, so our U.S. foreign policy doesn't hurt anyone, doesn't upset anyone across the globe. You're dismissing all of that reality. It's like, that's really important thing to understand.
No, 100%. I mean, everything's a level deeper, right? As we start to dig into these things. And I mean, the main reason I talked about it, like my whole show last week, I was talking about this, I feel like, and I feel like there's a reflex of a lot of people who, are in our liberty freedom circle, who just jump so quickly on things. And I see these influencers out there who they make their living off of it. It's like, we got to be careful here, guys. Like, these people, they get paid more money if, these things gain traction. So let's be careful, careful where we put our attention. But we're coming up on the end of the show here, Buck. But I just wanted to ask you one more question, kind of open-ended, but what kind of advice would you give to somebody who looks at the world today, sees the position that we're in, sees all this chaos happening around them, all this disillusionment? Is that a word? Disillusionment. What kind of encouragement or advice would you give them?
Well, I wouldn't blame them, for one. I will say, if you get nihilistic, disheartened, and depressed or down or anxious about the craziness that's all around, I would say understand that this has always been the case. It will always be the case. We are spoiled because we're a rich nation, and it's the sort of thing, that whole phrase of rich times create weak men. A lot of people faced way more scary things than we face. There's people, certainly in John, in your area, maybe to this day, but certainly generations before you, that were coal miners and worked their ass off all day. That's not a very comfortable living for me. And although I run into burning buildings, that's a far cry in my personal opinion. Like, there's generations before us worked hard, just dealt with shit, right? And I think the spirit of nihilism, a post-Christian age, has sort of lifted away this, like, regard for Christ and God that people had generations ago, that you just took for granted. And so once that sort of left society, largely speaking, it gives people nothing else to turn to except we can't do this ourselves. And if you're the kind of, there's libertarians I would know in the past, I'm just going to go screw the government, man, screw all this, I'm going off grid, I'm going to live by myself. Well, you get out there by yourself and you want to turn into Uncle Ted and some of the issues he faced. I don't necessarily think the human being's made for that. We're made for communion and community with with God and with neighbors and
Mm-hmm.
with close circles. If you're in a big city, maybe consider at least moving to the outskirts, because it's just darker and a lot of crazier things happen in these high urban density areas. But look into, I'm biased. I think after finding the Orthodox Church, that sort of obsession with conspiracy and with who's doing what and how are they going to lock me down again and how are they going to do this, a lot of that sort of lifted. And it's not like I'm some Pollyanna, like, oh, everything's just great now. But to understand this world is temporary, this life is temporary, you will have an eternal life outside of this skin suit here. And I promise you, the depth of hell would make these scary moments that we think we're seeing today look like rainbows and unicorns. And so, not to sound preachy or like, aha, you better do this, young man, but at least give it a shot. I know God's revelation of the human heart by Seraphim Rose sort of shifted my entire worldview, and that helped.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I guess one more thing, your plugs, your podcast, for those not familiar with it, and I don't know if you want to share socials or anything else.
Sure. It's through Dissident Media now. Dissidentmedia.net is, some of these guys I think are friends of you, Dan Smots and
okay, yeah.
That's the company my podcast is under now, and the podcast is called CounterFlow with Buck Johnson. YouTube page, Rumble. It's on all the podcatchers. Follow me on X at Buck Rebel, BuckRebel, if you'd like to do that. And that's the plugs.
All right. Buck Johnson, thanks for coming to the show, man.
You got it.
All right. That is a wrap for today's show. Hopefully you all got something out of this conversation today. As always, with me, it's an open door policy. If you guys want to talk about anything that we talked about on the show today, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. It's at John Odermatt. Same thing on Instagram. And you can always send me an email, john@lionsofliberty.com. Ask me a question, or if you want to recommend a guest, I'm open to that as well. So I want to thank you all for listening today. If you like what you heard, and if you like our other shows, you might want to consider joining our Lions of Liberty Pride, where you can do so on Patreon or on Locals. And we have bonus content and some other perks there. You can check that out. But with that being said, I'll see you all next week. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and those fires of liberty burning.